Your motorcycle doesn't make you look cool. It makes you look like a complete joke. Today, we're brutally exposing 100 motorcycles that make you look like a clown with zero taste and even less sense. Let's start with the riders held together by zip ties and pure delusion, because somehow they think that's roadworthy. Suzuki ownership is the motorcycle equivalent of finding a designer suit at a thrift store. You're getting premium performance without the premium price tag, and you're not afraid to tell everyone about your savvy decision. Your GSXR or V-Strom was purchased based on an almost mathematical formula of performance per dollar, and you defend this decision with spreadsheet-worthy precision. You've used the phrase "just as good as" so many times it should be printed on your riding jacket. The rest of us roll our eyes at your budget-conscious approach that often crosses into cheapskate territory. Your idea of maintenance is fix it when it breaks, and your bike looks like it survived a post-apocalyptic scavenger hunt with mismatched fairings and zip-tied turn signals. You'll spend hours arguing why your 10-year-old Gixxer is basically the same as a brand-new R1 while ignoring the duct tape holding your seat together. But your pragmatic approach to motorcycling is secretly admirable. You understand that motorcycles are tools meant to be ridden, not precious objects to be coddled. Your budget-conscious approach means you're actually out riding while others are saving up for their next accessory. There's something refreshingly honest about prioritizing function over form and miles over appearance. You're getting the most bang for your buck, and in a hobby that can quickly become a financial black hole, that's actually pretty smart. Speaking of financial black holes, let's talk about the people who think loud pipes save lives, but can't seem to hear their own financial advisor screaming. Harley riders aren't just motorcycle owners. They're brand ambassadors for a lifestyle that's equal parts nostalgia and rebellion. Your garage likely contains more Harley-branded items than your actual wardrobe, and you've memorized the company's founding date to drop into conversations. The Harley community is uniquely tribal. You wave exclusively to other Harleys while ignoring sport bikes, as if they're riding invisible motorcycles. Your vocabulary includes terms like bagger, softail, and twin cam, which you use with religious reverence. Let's be honest, you're the vegans of the motorcycle world. How do you know someone rides a Harley? Don't worry, they'll tell you within 30 seconds of meeting them. Your insistence that loud pipes save lives while setting off car alarms at 6 a.m. makes you the neighborhood nuisance. The rest of us are just trying to figure out how a vehicle that weighs as much as a small planet and has the turning radius of an oil tanker counts as a nimble form of transportation. But here's the thing. Behind all that chrome and leather beats the heart of genuine motorcycle culture. When charity rides need participants, Harley folks show up in droves. When a rider is stranded, even one on a Japanese sport bike, it's often the Harley rider who stops first. You might be loud, proud, and slightly obnoxious, but you're keeping a uniquely American tradition alive, and there's something genuinely cool about that, even if we'll never admit it to your face. If Harley riders are the loud uncles of motorcycling, our next group is definitely the pretentious cousins who studied abroad for one semester and won't shut up about it. Ducati ownership is less a transportation choice and more a passionate love affair with mechanical art. You don't just ride, you experience your motorcycle, often describing the sound of your dry clutch as mechanical symphony with zero irony. Your relationship with your Ducati dealer's service department is more consistent than most of your personal relationships. You've got their number saved under Italian therapist, and you're on a first-name basis with everyone from the service manager to the courtesy shuttle driver. The rest of us can't stand your pretentious attitude about Italian engineering while we watch you stranded yet again with electrical gremlins. You've turned motorcycle maintenance into a personality trait. Acting like spending half your paycheck on desmodromic valve adjustments is some kind of virtue. The way you look down your nose at Japanese bikes while secretly envying their reliability is the two-wheeled equivalent of claiming you prefer vinyl while streaming Spotify when nobody's looking. But damn it, when that Italian twin is singing and you're carving through canyons, you make the rest of us question our life choices. There's something undeniably special about Ducati's racing heritage and the way they blend art with engineering. Your passion for the experience of riding, not just the destination, reminds us all why we fell in love with motorcycles in the first place. Just maybe tone down the Italian passion speeches after your third espresso, okay? From Italian drama queens to German control freaks. Coming up next, the riders who treat motorcycles like science projects and somehow manage to suck the fun out of going fast. BMW riders approach motorcycling with the precision of German engineering. Your idea of packing light for a trip includes 3 waterproof layers, a toolkit that would make a mechanic jealous, and emergency rations that could sustain you through nuclear winter. You've got more acronyms on your bike than the military has in their entire operation manual. From ESA, ABS to ASC to DTC, you can recite what each one does and why it's essential for your 7-mile commute to work. The motorcycle community collectively rolls their eyes at your all the gear, all the time lectures, and the way you've turned basic safety into moral superiority. Your $3,000 Klim Adventure suit has never seen dirt, and you treat the owner's manual like religious text. The rest of us are tired of hearing how your electronically adjustable suspension makes our bikes feel like covered wagons, while you fiddle with your GPS to find the nearest Starbucks on your adventure. But secretly, we all wish we had your level of preparation when the skies open up and you're the only one riding comfortably through a downpour. Your methodical approach to maintenance means your bike will still be running perfectly when ours are long scrapped. In a world of Instagram posers, you're actually putting serious miles on your machines, crossing continents while the rest of us debate the merits of different exhaust notes. You might be the motorcycle equivalent of the kid who reminded the teacher about homework, but you're doing this whole motorcycling thing properly. If BMW riders are overthinking every ride, our next group might not be thinking at all. Let's talk about the folks who approach motorcycling with the same passion and precision as picking out a grocery bag. Honda riders value function over form with almost religious dedication. You researched your motorcycle purchase for months, reading every comparison test and reliability survey before confidently selecting the most sensible option available. Your maintenance schedule isn't just followed, it's anticipated. You change your oil 100 miles before the manual suggests because it's just good practice. Your garage is organized with laboratory precision, and your tools are arranged by size and function. The rest of us mock your utter lack of excitement about motorcycling. You approach riding with all the passion of someone selecting a refrigerator, prioritizing reliability statistics over soul. Your CBR has all the personality of a kitchen appliance, and you ride with the enthusiasm of someone filing their taxes. We're out here having emotional relationships with our bikes, while you're basically commuting on a calculator with wheels. Yet there's something admirable about your drama-free approach to motorcycling. While we're posting breakdown stories on forums, you're actually riding. When we're waiting for parts, you're racking up miles. Your Honda might not stir the soul, but it never breaks your heart either. There's wisdom in choosing a motorcycle that just works every single time, without the emotional roller coaster. You're not passionate about motorcycles. You're passionate about motorcycling, and maybe that's the smarter approach all along. If Honda riders are the sensible shoes of motorcycling, then our next group is the flip-flops on a roller coaster, chugging energy drinks and praying the road doesn't bite back. Hold my beer, this one's wild. Kawasaki riders approach motorcycling with the subtlety of a monster truck rally. Your color palette ranges from lime green to nuclear waste green, and you see nothing wrong with this aesthetic choice. You've memorized your bike's horsepower and torque figures, and recite them with the reverence others reserve for their children's birthdays. Your phone contains at least a dozen videos of your exhaust note, most filmed in tunnels or parking garages for maximum acoustic effect. The motorcycling community collectively cringes at your monster energy-fueled approach to riding. You treat public roads like your personal racetrack, and your definition of braking in the engine involves redlining it at every opportunity. Your riding gear looks like it was designed by a committee of 13-year-old boys who just discovered energy drinks, and your interpretation of traffic laws is more like guidelines, really. But your childlike enthusiasm for motorcycling is secretly infectious. While the rest of us are overthinking every aspect of riding, you're out there having genuine, uncomplicated fun. Your willingness to push limits has made you a surprisingly skilled rider, and beneath the squid antics lies a genuine passion for mastering your machine. You remind the rest of us that motorcycling should be exhilarating, not just practical. Just maybe keep the wheelies for the track, okay? Some of us want motorcycling to remain legal. Now that we've survived the neon green adrenaline junkies, let's move on to the human equivalent of ordering vanilla at a gourmet dessert shop. You know who you are, blending in at every bike meet like it's a witness protection program. Yamaha riders represent the perfect middle ground of motorcycling. Technical enough to appreciate engineering, but not so obsessed that it becomes your entire personality. You chose your bike after careful consideration of performance, reliability, and value, creating a Venn diagram where all three circles overlap perfectly. You take quiet pride in knowing your R1's crossplane crankshaft shares technology with MotoGP bikes, but you don't feel the need to mention this in every conversation. Your modifications are tasteful and functional rather than flashy, focusing on subtle improvements rather than attention-grabbing additions. The rest of us find your middle-of-the-road approach almost suspiciously balanced. You're not Italian exotic enough for the Ducati crowd, not adventure-ready enough for the BMW folks, and not American enough for the Harley tribe. Your reasonable approach to motorcycling makes you nearly invisible in a community that thrives on strong opinions and tribal identities. You're the motorcycle equivalent of saying your favorite ice cream flavor is vanilla. Technically fine, but suspiciously lacking in commitment. Yet your balanced approach makes you perhaps the most complete motorcyclist of all. You're skilled without being reckless, knowledgeable without being pretentious, and passionate without being obsessive. Your bike strikes the perfect balance between reliability and character, performance and practicality. While the rest of us are defending our extreme choices, you're quietly enjoying the best of all worlds. There's wisdom in moderation, even if it doesn't make for the most exciting Instagram content. If Yamaha riders are suspiciously well-adjusted, our next group is what happens when you hand a Mountain Dew-chugging teenager a black card and zero survival instinct. Buckle up, Buttercup. This is about to get sketchy. KTM ownership isn't just a motorcycle choice. It's a personality disorder disguised as a transportation decision. Your idea of a relaxing Sunday ride includes terrain that would challenge a mountain goat, and you consider pavement a necessary evil between dirt sections. Your motorcycle has more suspension travel than most riders have courage, and you use every millimeter of it regularly. Your riding gear looks like it was designed by someone who exclusively consumes energy drinks and action movies, with more neon colors than a 1980s dance party. The rest of us are exhausted just listening to your stories about sending it over obstacles that would give mountain goats pause. Your entire personality revolves around how extreme your last ride was, and you treat basic self-preservation as a character flaw. Your maintenance schedule is best described as ride it until something breaks, then jump it anyway. The phrase, "hold my beer," seems to precede most of your riding decisions. But your unbridled enthusiasm for pushing limits is secretly inspiring. When the rest of us are calculating risks, you're calculating airtime. Your willingness to get back up after spectacular crashes shows a resilience that's genuinely admirable. You approach motorcycling with a purity of purpose, finding the absolute limit of what's possible on two wheels, and there's something beautifully uncomplicated about that philosophy. You remind us that motorcycling should be an adventure, not just transportation, even if your version of adventure requires an on-call orthopedic surgeon. From the emergency room regulars to the Instagram influencers of motorcycling, let's talk about people who spend more time choosing filters than riding lines. Triumph riders have elevated motorcycling to an art form where aesthetics are equally important as performance. Your Bonneville, Thruxton, or Speed Triple isn't just transportation. It's a carefully curated expression of your personal brand. You've spent more time selecting the perfect leather gloves to match your bike than most people spend choosing a college major. Your helmet collection is displayed like fine art, and each one has a story about the small batch manufacturer who handcrafts them in a converted barn somewhere. The rest of us are tired of your Instagram photo shoots in front of brick walls and your lectures about authentic motorcycling experience. You've turned riding into performance art, and your bike spends more time being photographed than actually ridden. You can't just enjoy a motorcycle. You have to create an entire aesthetic around it. complete with matching boots, jacket, and carefully curated facial hair. But your appreciation for the artistry of motorcycling reminds the rest of us why these machines captivate us in the first place. You see beauty where others see transportation, and your attention to detail elevates the entire culture. Behind the carefully crafted image is genuine passion for motorcycling history and design. You're preserving a connection to motorcycling's golden age while embracing modern performance, creating a bridge between generations of riders. Just maybe ease up on the filtered photos. We get it. Your bike looks good. If Triumph riders are the hipsters of motorcycling, then get ready, because our next group is basically Harley guys in denial. They crave the rumble, reject the label, and absolutely need you to know they're different. This one's going to sting. Indian motorcycle owners are history buffs with a rebellious streak. You didn't just buy a motorcycle. You invested in American heritage with a side of contrarianism. Your garage contains at least one book about the history of American motorcycling, which you've highlighted extensively. You take immense satisfaction in correcting Harley owners about which company came first, and you've memorized production dates and historical milestones to support your position in these debates. Your knowledge of flathead engines and board track racing would qualify you for a teaching position at a motorcycle history department, if such a thing existed. The rest of us are exhausted by your, well, actually approach to American motorcycling. You've turned being a contrarian into a lifestyle choice, defining yourself by what you're not, a Harley rider, rather than what you are. You can't just enjoy your bike. You have to deliver a history lecture that nobody asked for, complete with references to the original Springfield factory and the 1920s racing team. But your dedication to preserving an alternative American motorcycle tradition adds valuable diversity to the riding community. You've rescued an iconic American brand from the history books and given it new life. Your knowledge of motorcycling history enriches the entire community, even if we pretend to check our phones when you start talking about board track racers. Behind the historical obsession is a genuine appreciation for engineering excellence and American craftsmanship that transcends brand tribalism. And finally, for those who wanted to be different, but also wanted to ensure no mechanic within 100 miles could fix their bike, let's talk about the most obscure choice a motorcyclist can make. Moto Guzzi ownership is the motorcycle equivalent of collecting rare vinyl records. It's not just about transportation, it's about appreciating something unique that most people will never understand. Your motorcycle choice reflects a level of individualism that borders on stubborn defiance of mainstream options. You've become an amateur historian by necessity, able to explain your bike's unusual transverse V-twin engine configuration and the company's century-long history to confused onlookers who mistake your bike for some kind of BMW. You've practiced this explanation so many times you could deliver it in your sleep. The rest of us question your sanity for choosing a bike that vibrates like it's powered by angry bees and has a parts supply chain that involves international shipping and prayers to Italian motorcycle deities. Your idea of reliability is, it usually starts eventually. And your definition of dealer support is a guy in Milan who checks his email once a month. You've turned mechanical quirks into character features through sheer force of will. But your commitment to riding something truly unique in a world of mass-produced sameness is secretly admirable. You choose passion over practicality, character over convenience, and in doing so, you're preserving a slice of motorcycling history that would otherwise be lost. Your Guzzi isn't just transportation, it's a living museum piece that you've kept on the road through dedication and love. In a world where motorcycles are becoming increasingly homogenized, you're keeping genuine diversity alive, one quirky Italian V-twin at a time. Hyosung ownership is what happens when you want a motorcycle that looks like $1,000,000, but costs about as much as a decent bicycle. You didn't buy a motorcycle, you purchased a rolling experiment in how close can we get to a real bike without actually being one. Your GT650R, or GV650, represents your unwavering faith in Korean engineering and your ability to ignore every warning sign that screams, "You get what you pay for." You've memorized every forum post about common problems and consider yourself a shade tree mechanic by necessity rather than choice. The rest of us watch in horror as you defend build quality that makes Harbor Freight tools look premium while your bike develops new and creative ways to break down. You've turned optimism into a survival skill. and your garage looks like a motorcycle emergency room with more broken parts than functional ones. The way you justify buying a bike that costs less than most people's riding gear while acting surprised when it doesn't perform like a premium machine is peak bargain hunter delusion. But your willingness to take chances on the underdog keeps motorcycle prices competitive for everyone else. You're proving that you don't need to spend a fortune to experience the joy of motorcycling. And when your Hyosung is actually running, it delivers surprisingly decent performance for the money. Your budget-conscious approach reminds us that motorcycling should be accessible to everyone, not just people with premium budgets. Plus, you've developed mechanical skills that put most riders to shame, even if it was through necessity rather than choice. If Hyosung riders are bargain hunters, our next group is stuck somewhere between a Renaissance fair and a midlife crisis. Prepare yourself for the most pretentious 2 minutes of your day. Royal Enfield ownership is less about motorcycling and more about time travel with training wheels. You didn't buy a bike. You purchased a lifestyle that peaked sometime around 1955, and you're determined to keep it on life support. Your Interceptor or Classic 350 leaks oil with such consistency that you've started carrying absorbent pads like their standard riding gear. You've memorized the company's colonial history and can recite manufacturing dates like you're defending a doctoral thesis on British motorcycle imperialism. The motorcycle community collectively eye-rolls at your "they don't make them like they used to" lectures while watching you frantically Google "Royal Enfield dealer near me" for the third time this month. You've convinced yourself that 35 horsepower is plenty for real riding, while the rest of us lap you on highway on-ramps. Your Instagram feed looks like a sepia-toned museum exhibit, complete with vintage leather jackets that cost more than most people's bikes, and you can't ride to Starbucks without stopping for a photo shoot. But your dedication to keeping classic motorcycling aesthetics alive in a world of plastic fairings and digital displays is genuinely admirable. You're preserving a connection to motorcycling's romantic past, and there's something beautifully authentic about choosing character over convenience. Your Royal Enfield might be slow, but it has soul in a way that modern bikes sometimes lack. And your commitment to the riding experience over pure performance reminds us why we fell in love with motorcycles in the first place. Now that we've turned back time, let's go back to the modern world where we can track day terrorists, people who mistake public roads for Mugello and consider noise ordinances as personal challenges. Aprilia ownership is what happens when you mistake a public road for Mugello and your daily commute for a MotoGP qualifying session. You didn't buy a motorcycle. You purchased a barely street-legal race bike that you'll spend more time explaining to insurance adjusters than actually riding. Your RSV4 or Tuono makes sounds that violate several noise ordinances, and you consider this a feature, not a bug. You've memorized lap times from tracks you've never visited and can recite horsepower figures with the precision of a NASA engineer calculating orbital trajectories. The rest of us are tired of your "it's basically a MotoGP bike" speeches, while you struggle to keep up in parking lot maneuvers. Your idea of practical transportation involves full leathers for a grocery run, and you treat speed limits like gentle suggestions from people who clearly don't understand Italian engineering excellence. But when you're carving through canyons on that screaming Italian missile, you make the rest of us question why we settled for anything less aggressive. Your commitment to pure performance over comfort reminds us that motorcycles were meant to be thrilling, not just efficient. There's something intoxicating about riding a machine that shares DNA with actual MotoGP bikes, and your passion for extracting every ounce of performance keeps the sport bike spirit alive in an increasingly practical world. If Aprilia riders are track day terrorists, then our next group is what happens when you give a philosophy major a motorcycle budget and zero mechanical aptitude. MV Agusta ownership isn't a transportation choice. It's a commitment to suffering beautifully. You didn't buy a motorcycle. You entered into an abusive relationship with Italian engineering that you'll defend with Stockholm Syndrome-level dedication. Your F4 or Brutal spends more time being admired in your garage than actually running, and you've convinced yourself this is part of the authentic Italian experience. You know your local MV dealer's coffee preferences and have their parts department on speed dial. The rest of us watch in horror as you defend electrical problems that would make a Ducati owner blush. You've turned mechanical unreliability into a badge of honor, acting like push-starting a $20,000 motorcycle is some kind of spiritual journey. Your bike looks like it was designed by angels but engineered by people who clearly hate motorcyclists, and you spend more on maintenance than most people spend on their entire bike. But damn, when that Italian artwork is running properly, it's pure motorcycle poetry in motion. Your willingness to endure mechanical drama for moments of transcendent beauty reminds us why we fell in love with motorcycles in the first place. You're keeping the most exclusive slice of Italian motorcycle culture alive, and when your MV is singing through the gears, it creates moments of pure mechanical ecstasy that justify every frustrating breakdown. Your commitment to beauty over practicality preserves something magical in motorcycling. From Italian masochists to British eccentrics, let's talk about people who think motorcycles should handle like shopping carts and sound like lawnmowers having an existential crisis. Norton ownership is what happens when you confuse brand loyalty with Stockholm Syndrome. You didn't buy a motorcycle, you adopted a mechanical orphan that requires constant emotional support and financial intervention. Your Commando or modern Norton represents your unwavering faith in British engineering, despite overwhelming evidence that this faith might be misplaced. You've memorized the company's bankruptcy timeline with the dedication of a historian studying the fall of Rome. The motorcycle community watches in fascination as you defend vibration levels that would qualify as industrial equipment and electrical systems designed by people who apparently never heard of reliability. You've turned mechanical quirks into personality features and treat oil leaks like they're marking territory. Your definition of running well would horrify owners of functional motorcycles, and you've developed an almost supernatural ability to rationalize problems that would send normal people straight to the Honda dealer. But your dedication to keeping British motorcycle heritage alive is genuinely touching. You're preserving a piece of motorcycling history through sheer force of will and unlimited optimism, and there's something beautifully romantic about your commitment to the underdog. Your Norton connects you to motorcycling's golden age in a way that modern bikes simply can't. And your persistence in keeping these temperamental machines running preserves craftsmanship and character that the world desperately needs. If Norton riders are nostalgic optimists, then buckle up for the people who've turned motorcycle ownership into a full-time engineering degree program. Bimota ownership is less about transportation and more about owning a rolling dissertation on motorcycle engineering. You didn't buy a bike. You invested in a mechanical philosophy that most people will never understand or appreciate. Your Tesi or DB series represents the intersection of Italian design and engineering obsession taken to its logical extreme. You can explain the benefits of hub-center steering with the passion of someone defending their doctoral thesis, even though you're the only person who asked the question. The rest of us are exhausted by your lectures on advanced chassis dynamics while you struggle to find anyone who can service your mechanical unicorn. You've turned exclusivity into a personality trait, and your bike spends more time being explained than written. Your idea of casual conversation involves terms like anti-dive geometry and mass centralization, and you treat every parking lot encounter like a teaching opportunity that nobody requested. But your appreciation for engineering excellence pushes the entire motorcycle industry forward. You're supporting innovation that trickles down to the rest of us, and your willingness to embrace radical engineering solutions reminds us that motorcycles can be more than just transportation. They can be art. When your Bimota is working properly, it demonstrates what's possible when engineers are allowed to dream without compromise. And your support for cutting-edge technology keeps motorcycling from becoming stagnant. From engineering snobs to the people who think vintage means purchased this century, let's discuss riders who've made retro styling into a full-time personality. Moto Morini ownership is what happens when you want to be different, but not so different that you can't find parts. You didn't buy a motorcycle. You selected a conversation piece that requires constant explanation to confused onlookers. Your Corsaro or modern Morini represents your commitment to supporting the underdog of Italian motorcycling. You've become an amateur historian by necessity, able to recite the company's history and explain why your bike is basically a Ducati but better to anyone who'll listen. The motorcycle community politely nods while you explain your bike's unique features, secretly wondering why you didn't just buy something they've actually heard of. You've turned obscurity into a virtue and treat your bike's rarity like it's a precious artifact rather than transportation. Your garage contains more literature about your motorcycle than most people have about their hobbies, and you've memorized production numbers like they're sacred texts. The way you act superior about owning something exclusive while struggling to find basic maintenance items is peak boutique snobbery. But your support for small manufacturers keeps diversity alive in an increasingly homogenized market. You're preserving Italian motorcycle culture beyond the big names, and your passion for the unusual enriches the entire community. Your Morini represents craftsmanship and attention to detail that mass-produced bikes often lack, and your willingness to choose character over convenience keeps unique engineering approaches alive. You're proof that motorcycling is about more than just the biggest brands. If Morini riders are boutique rebels, number 3 takes it to a whole new level. Riders who treat their bikes like rollings in mechanical disasters. The way you justify buying Italian styling with Chinese reliability while paying European prices is a masterclass in cognitive dissonance. But your willingness to take chances on the underdog keeps competition alive in the motorcycle market. You're supporting innovation and keeping prices competitive for the Husqvarna ownership means you've chosen the Swedish approach to getting dirty, methodically, efficiently, and with absolutely no regard for your long-term orthopedic health. You didn't buy a motorcycle. You purchased a subscription to emergency room visits disguised as weekend entertainment. Your 701 Enduro or Vitpilen represents your commitment to finding the most challenging way to get from point A to point B. You see a perfectly good road and immediately start looking for ways to avoid using it, preferring trails that would challenge a mountain goat with anxiety issues. The motorcycle community watches in horror as you treat public roads like connecting sections between the real riding, which apparently happens in places that require tetanus shots to access. You've turned basic self-preservation into a character flaw and consider protective gear optional equipment. Your idea of a relaxing ride involves terrain that would make a trials bike nervous, and you measure successful rides by how much dirt you can shake out of your gear afterward. The way you casually mention getting some air while describing your commute to work terrifies normal people. But your commitment to exploring every inch of available terrain reminds us why motorcycles were invented in the first place. You're keeping the adventure spirit alive in an increasingly sanitized world, and your willingness to go where others fear to tread opens up possibilities the rest of us never considered. Your Husqvarna connects you to landscapes and experiences that four wheels simply can't access, and your fearless approach to riding inspires the rest of us to push our own boundaries, even if we draw the line at actual cliffs. If Husqvarna riders are dirt disciples, then our next group has turned motorcycle ownership into a full-time research project with wheels. Ural ownership isn't a transportation choice. It's a commitment to keeping Soviet-era engineering alive through sheer force of will and an apparently unlimited tolerance for mechanical quirks. You didn't buy a motorcycle, you adopted a historical artifact that occasionally runs. Your sidecar rig represents your dedication to the most impractical form of motorcycling ever devised. You've memorized the locations of every Ural dealer within a 500-mile radius and consider them extended family members rather than service providers. The rest of us are amazed by your ability to find joy in machinery that predates modern concepts like reliability and electrical systems that work. You've turned mechanical archaeology into a hobby and treat your bike's quirks like they're charming personality features rather than fundamental design flaws. Your garage looks like a museum of Soviet engineering, complete with spare parts that are older than most riders. The way you describe electrical gremlins as character while push-starting your bike in sub-zero temperatures defies all logic and self-preservation instincts. But your dedication to preserving a unique slice of motorcycling history is genuinely admirable. You're keeping alive a form of motorcycling that connects us to a different era and philosophy of engineering. And there's something beautifully stubborn about your commitment to the unconventional. Your Ural might not be fast or reliable, but it's definitely memorable. And in a world of increasingly similar motorcycles, that individuality is worth preserving. Plus, you can carry a passenger and luggage simultaneously, which is more practical than most of us will admit. After that archaeology lesson, get ready. These next riders take Japanese precision to a whole new level, obsessing over every bolt like it's sacred. But is it dedication or something deeper? Yamaha Tenere ownership represents the Japanese approach to adventure riding, thoroughly researched, properly equipped, and executed with the precision of a military operation. You didn't buy a motorcycle, you invested in a mobile base camp that happens to have 2 wheels. Your T7 is equipped with more accessories than most people's garages, and you can justify every single purchase with detailed explanations about specific riding scenarios. You've turned packing for a trip into an engineering exercise that would impress NASA logistics coordinators. The adventure riding community secretly envies your level of preparation, while publicly mocking your inability to leave the house without consulting weather reports, GPS coordinates, and backup plans for your backup plans. You've turned spontaneous adventure into a carefully orchestrated expedition, complete with spreadsheets and contingency protocols. Your idea of roughing it involves more gear than most people take on month-long vacations, and you treat every ride like you're crossing the Sahara even when you're just going to the grocery store. But your methodical approach to adventure riding means you're actually out there exploring, while others are still planning. Your Tenere will reliably get you to places others only dream about, and your preparation ensures you'll make it back safely. In a world of Instagram adventurers, you're doing the real thing with competence and reliability that's genuinely impressive. Your systematic approach to motorcycling opens up possibilities that spontaneous riders miss, and your stories of successful expeditions inspire the rest of us to plan our own adventures. Number 15 is a 3-wheeled abomination that pretends it's a car, but drives like a drunk shopping cart being pushed by someone having a seizure. The Polaris Slingshot is what happens when someone looks at a perfectly good motorcycle and decides it needs more wheels and less fun, plus the aerodynamics of a refrigerator. This 1,700-pound monstrosity comes with a 2.0-liter engine that produces about 203 horsepower, which sounds impressive until you realize you're hauling around the weight of a small car with none of the practicality. The Slingshot gets a pathetic 30 miles per gallon and costs more than most decent motorcycles, starting around $35,000 for the privilege of looking like you couldn't decide between a motorcycle and a go-kart. So you chose the worst aspects of both. The handling is about as precise as a blindfolded surgeon performing brain surgery during an earthquake, and the ride quality makes a cement mixer seem smooth and refined. You'll spend more time explaining what it is than actually enjoying it, and every real motorcyclist will look at you like you've committed a crime against 2-wheeled transportation. The steering wheel feels like it's connected to the front wheels through a series of rubber bands and wishful thinking, and the suspension has all the sophistication of a pogo stick designed by someone who'd never seen one before and was working from a description given by a drunk person. It's the perfect vehicle for someone who wants the worst aspects of both cars and motorcycles combined into one expensive mistake. Hate 3-wheelers? Number 14 might be the most lifeless one yet, But there's a reason it's still selling, and it's way dumber than you think. Electric motorcycles are the future, but the Zero SRF is stuck in the present with all the charm of a silent, expensive paperweight that occasionally moves. This $19,000 electric bike promises 176 miles of city range, which translates to about 117 miles combined range in the real world if you actually want to use any of its 113 horsepower, or about 40 miles if you dare to ride it like you actually paid for performance. The SRF weighs 500 pounds and feels every bit of it when you're pushing it to a charging station after it dies 20 miles short of your destination, leaving you stranded like a tourist with a dead phone in a foreign country. The charging time is laughably long. Plan on spending 2.7 hours with the standard charger plugged or hunting down one of the 3 fast chargers in your entire state, assuming they're working and not occupied by someone else having the same brilliant idea. But here's the real kicker. It sounds like a vacuum cleaner having an existential crisis mixed with the gentle hum of a microwave that's given up on life. Half the joy of motorcycling is the sound, the visceral connection between man and machine, and this thing delivers all the auditory excitement of a library during finals week. You'll pay supercar money for the performance of a decent sport bike, with the added bonus of range anxiety that makes every ride feel like a math test you didn't study for, and the constant fear that your expensive toy will become a very heavy brick the moment the battery decides to give up on your relationship. If you thought that three-wheel disaster was for idiots, number 13 will make you question humanity. Anyone who buys this next bike clearly fails basic common sense. The Ural Gear Up is what happens when someone takes a 1940s design and decides it doesn't need any improvements for the next 80 years, because apparently innovation is for weaklings and people who actually want their vehicles to work properly. This Russian relic comes with a sidecar, whether you want one or not, because apparently the engineers thought 3 wheels were better than 2, even when 2 of them are on the same side like some kind of mechanical birth defect. By a 749cc flat twin engine that produces a whopping 40 horsepower, which is less power than most modern lawnmowers, the Ural struggles to reach highway speeds and gets about 35 miles per gallon despite having the aerodynamics of a brick wall attached to another brick wall. At $18,000, you're paying premium prices for technology that were outdated when your grandfather was young and dinosaurs roamed the earth, or at least when people thought reliability was optional. The build quality is so questionable that breakdowns aren't a possibility. They're a mathematical certainty, like death, taxes, and disappointing sequels. You'll become intimately familiar with roadside repairs and the inside of motorcycle shops, to the point where mechanics will start charging you rent. The handling is terrifying, especially in crosswinds, where the sidecar acts like a sail trying to launch you into the nearest ditch, while the bike argues with physics about which direction it actually wants to go. It's the perfect bike for someone who thinks reliability is overrated, enjoys explaining to AA why their motorcycle has 3 wheels, and has a masochistic relationship with mechanical devices. If you think that 80-year-old Russian disaster was for complete morons, number 12 will make your jaw drop. This next bike is ridiculously stupid. Even billionaires with brain damage wouldn't touch it. The Confederate Hellcat is what happens when someone with more money than sense decides to build a motorcycle out of solid billet aluminum and charge supercar prices for the privilege of owning something that looks like it was designed by aliens who had only heard motorcycles described through interpretive dance. At over $100,000, this rolling sculpture is less a motorcycle and more expensive way to announce that you've completely lost touch with reality and probably shouldn't be trusted with sharp objects or financial decisions. This 2,163cc V-twin produces impressive power figures that look great on paper, but good luck using any of it without ending up in a ditch or a hospital. The bike weighs over 600 pounds and handles like a chrome-plated refrigerator that's been filled with concrete and pushed down a hill by someone who's never seen a motorcycle before. The riding position is so uncomfortable that anything longer than a trip to Starbucks becomes an endurance test that would make Navy SEALs weep, and the suspension is so stiff it makes medieval torture devices seem comfortable and user-friendly. The worst part? It's not even reliable, which is impressive considering how much money they're charging for it. These hand-built nightmares spend more time in the shop than on the road. And when something breaks, which it will, probably while you're showing it off to your equally wealthy and equally foolish friends, you'll need to take out a second mortgage to fix it. Parts availability is a joke that would make stand-up comedians jealous, and finding a mechanic willing to work on your expensive mistake is like finding a unicorn that's also a certified accountant. You're not buying transportation, you're buying a very expensive conversation piece that occasionally runs and always disappoints. If you thought spending 18 grand on outdated tech was idiotic, number 11 will blow your mind. This next purchase is so dumb, mechanics refuse to work on it. The Aprilia Shiver 900 sounds like it should be exciting, but it's actually named after what you'll do every time you try to start it and realize you've made a terrible mistake. This Italian naked bike promises 95 horsepower from its 896cc V-twin, but what it delivers is a masterclass in electrical gremlins and mechanical frustration that would make a broken printer seem reliable and user-friendly. The Shiver's electronics are more temperamental than a reality TV star having a public meltdown, with random error codes appearing like unwanted guests at a dinner party who refuse to leave and keep eating all your food. The fuel injection system seems to have been calibrated by someone who'd never seen a motorcycle before and was working from instructions written in a language they didn't understand, resulting in jerky throttle response and stalling at the worst possible moments, like when you're trying to impress someone or escape from danger. At 463 pounds, it's not particularly light, and the handling feels disconnected and vague, like you're controlling the bike through a series of suggestions rather than actual mechanical connections. The suspension is either too soft or too hard, never quite right, like a mattress that was designed by committee, and the brakes feel like they're filled with pudding instead of brake fluid, requiring the kind of advanced planning usually reserved for space missions or retirement savings. For $11,000, you could buy a reliable Japanese bike that actually works and doesn't require a degree in electrical engineering to operate. But instead, you chose Italian frustration with a side of constant maintenance bills and the lingering suspicion that you've been scammed. If you ever meet someone who bought that Italian disaster, slowly back away. But number 10 is such a moronic purchase, it literally bankrupted the company that made it. Buell's final attempt at motorcycle manufacturing resulted in the 1190 RX, a bike that promised American superbike performance but delivered bankruptcy instead, which is like ordering a gourmet meal and receiving a bill for food poisoning. This 185 horsepower monster looked impressive on paper, but in reality, it was a ticking time bomb of mechanical failures and electrical nightmares that would make a haunted house seem predictable and reliable. The 1190 RX's unique fuel-in-frame design seemed innovative until you realized it made the bike a fire hazard waiting to happen, like storing gasoline in your living room and hoping for the best. The electronics were so unreliable that riders never knew if the bike would start, run properly, or simply decide to take a nap in the middle of traffic, like a narcoleptic teenager during a boring lecture. But here's the real joke that would make comedians weep with envy. When EBR went bankrupt, part support disappeared faster than your money when you bought this thing, leaving owners stranded with expensive paperweights that occasionally made motorcycle noises. You're now the proud owner of an expensive conversation piece with no factory support, no warranty coverage, and no hope of reliable repairs, making it the perfect bike for someone who enjoys the thrill of never knowing if they'll make it home or if they'll be walking and calling for a tow truck while explaining to their insurance company why their motorcycle is also a fire hazard. If you thought Italian bikes were made for lunatics, number 9 is straight out of a nightmare. It is so mind-numbingly stupid, you'll be begging to wake up. The MV Agusta Brutale 800 is Italian for expensive mistake that will haunt your dreams and empty your wallet. This 140 horsepower naked bike looks absolutely stunning, which is good because you'll be staring at it in your garage more than riding it. Like owning a supermodel who refuses to leave the house, MV Agusta has perfected the art of building beautiful motorcycles that don't actually work, which is impressive in its own tragic way. The Brutale's electronics are more complex than a space shuttle, and about as reliable as a chocolate teapot in a sauna, with systems that seem designed by people who think computers are powered by magic and good intentions. The bike suffers from constant sensor failures, mysterious error codes that would baffle NASA scientists, and a fuel injection system that seems to have been programmed by a caffeinated intern who was having a nervous breakdown. Starting the bike is like playing Russian roulette. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, and you'll never know why, making every ride an adventure in mechanical uncertainty. At $15,000, you're paying premium prices for the privilege of becoming an unpaid beta tester for a company that apparently thinks quality control is optional. The dealer network is sparse, parts are expensive when you can find them, and every ride becomes an adventure in mechanical uncertainty that makes gambling seem like a safe investment. It's the perfect bike for masochists who think reliability is for peasants and enjoy the thrill of never knowing if their expensive toy will actually function when they need it most. If you ever witness someone defending that bankrupt beauty, call a psychiatrist. However, number 8 is such a monumentally dumb buy, it makes bankruptcy look like success. The Benelli TNT 600i proves that not all motorcycles deserve to exist, and some should have been stopped at the design phase by people with functioning brain cells. This Chinese-built Italian-branded disaster produces 85 horsepower from its 600cc inline 4, which would be respectable if the bike could actually deliver that power reliably, without falling apart like a house of cards in a hurricane. The build quality is so poor that it makes discount furniture look well-crafted and professionally assembled. Bolts fall out like they're trying to escape from an abusive relationship, plastics crack from looking at them wrong, and the electrical system appears to have been designed by someone whose only experience with electricity came from sticking forks in outlets and wondering why the lights went out. The fuel injection is so poorly mapped that the bike runs like it's powered by hopes and dreams rather than gasoline, creating a riding experience that's more frustrating than trying to assemble IKEA furniture without instructions. At 485 pounds, it's heavier than most 600cc bikes while delivering less performance and reliability than a lawnmower that's been abandoned in a field for several years. The suspension feels like it was filled with concrete by people who thought comfort was a sign of weakness, and the brakes require the kind of advanced planning usually reserved for space missions or major life decisions. For the same money, you could buy a used Japanese bike that actually works and doesn't require constant prayers to mechanical deities, but apparently, you enjoy disappointment and have a complicated relationship with functional transportation. If you thought that Chinese-Italian Frankenstein was for morons, number 7 will blow your circuits. Anyone who buys this next disaster has clearly failed kindergarten. The Norton Commando 961 is what happens when nostalgia meets modern manufacturing incompetence, creating a perfect storm of disappointment that would make weather forecasters weep. This British bike promised to recapture the glory days of Norton, but instead delivered all the reliability issues of 1970s British engineering with modern prices that would make your accountant file for bankruptcy on your behalf. At $20,000, you're paying premium prices for the privilege of owning a motorcycle that spends more time broken than running, making it the perfect conversation piece for people who enjoy explaining why their expensive toy doesn't actually work. Parts availability is a joke that would make stand-up comedians jealous, and finding a mechanic who knows how to work on these things is like finding a competent politician or a unicorn that's also a certified public accountant. It's the perfect bike for someone who thinks modern reliability is overrated, enjoys the authentic British experience of constant mechanical failure, and has a masochistic relationship with transportation devices. The Norton Commando 961's electrical system appears to have been designed by someone whose understanding of wiring came from untangling Christmas lights while blindfolded and slightly intoxicated. Owners report mysterious electrical gremlins that would baffle even even the most experienced technicians, with warning lights that illuminate for no apparent reason and then disappear just as mysteriously, like automotive poltergeists with a sense of humor. The bike's computer system has the reliability of a weather forecast and the user-friendliness of a tax audit, often leaving riders stranded with error codes that require a degree in ancient hieroglyphics to decipher. It's the motorcycle equivalent of buying a beautiful vintage home that looks stunning from the outside, but has plumbing installed by someone who thought water flows uphill, and electricity is just angry pixies running through copper wires. Number 7 might have been a pretty dumb buy, but as soon as you hear about how stupid it would be to buy number 6, that British revival nightmare starts looking like a smart purchase. The Energica Ego is an electric superbike that costs $24,000 and delivers all the excitement of a very expensive appliance that occasionally moves. This Italian electric bike promises 145 horsepower and a top speed of 150 miles per hour, which is impressive until you realize the range is about 90 miles in real-world conditions, or about 20 minutes if you actually try to use the performance you paid for. The charging infrastructure for this thing is so sparse that planning a trip becomes an exercise in advanced mathematics and prayer, requiring the kind of strategic thinking usually reserved for military operations or chess grandmasters. You'll spend more time looking for charging stations than actually riding, and when you do find one, you'll wait for hours while your bike slowly sips electrons like a geriatric vampire with dietary restrictions, making every journey an exercise in patience that would test the resolve of Buddhist monks. The worst part? It weighs 573 pounds, making it heavier than most gas-powered superbikes, while delivering less range than a Prius driven by someone's grandmother who's afraid of highways. The silence is eerie rather than thrilling, removing the visceral connection between rider and machine that makes motorcycling exciting, and the constant range anxiety turns every ride into a stressful calculation of distance versus battery life that would make accountants nervous. It's the perfect bike for someone who wants to pay supercar prices for the convenience of a golf cart while pretending they're saving the environment one expensive mistake at a time. If you thought paying supercar prices for electric disappointment was idiotic, number 5 will floor you. Anyone who buys this next monstrosity clearly has more money than brain cells. The Bimota Tesi 3D looks like it was designed by aliens who had only heard motorcycles described over a bad phone connection by someone who was having a stroke. This hub center steered monstrosity costs over $40,000 and delivers handling that defies both physics and common sense, creating a riding experience that would confuse professional stunt riders and physics professors alike. The Tesi's unique front suspension system eliminates traditional forks in favor of a complex arrangement of links and pivots that makes the bike handle like it's constantly having an argument with the road about which direction it actually wants to go. The steering feel is so disconnected, you'll wonder if the handlebars are actually connected to anything meaningful, and the feedback is about as informative as a mime having a stroke while trying to explain quantum physics. Powered by a Ducati 1198 engine, it should be fast, but the bizarre chassis dynamics make it feel like you're riding a very expensive science experiment that escaped from a laboratory where mad scientists were trying to prove that conventional motorcycle design was too simple. Parts availability is non-existent, making repairs about as likely as finding affordable healthcare, and when something breaks, which it will, probably while you're trying to explain to someone why your motorcycle looks like it was designed by a committee of drunk engineers, you'll need to mortgage your house to fix it. It's the perfect bike for someone who thinks conventional motorcycles are too predictable and enjoys the thrill of never knowing which direction they're actually going or whether they'll arrive at their destination in one piece. If you ever meet someone who bought that steering experiment from hell, check their pulse. But number 4 is so mind-numbingly stupid, it makes mad science look sensible. The Vyrus 987 C34V is what happens when Italian engineers take too much espresso and decide to reinvent the motorcycle wheel while simultaneously proving that having too much money and not enough common sense can create truly spectacular failures. This $40,000 carbon fiber nightmare features hub center steering and a design that looks like it escaped from a dystopian future where motorcycles are built by a committee of people who've never actually seen one in person. The bike uses a Ducati 1198 engine, so it should be fast. But the bizarre chassis makes it handle like a shopping cart with a broken wheel being pushed by someone who's blindfolded and dizzy. The hub center steering provides all the road feel of a video game controller that's been dropped in water, and the riding position seems designed for someone with the proportions of a praying mantis who's been stretched on a medieval torture device. But here's the real kicker that would make comedians weep with envy. Reliability is about as consistent as Italian politics during a government crisis. When something breaks, and it will, probably while you're trying to impress someone with your expensive mistake, you'll discover that parts don't exist in this dimension, and the 3 people in the world who know how to fix it are all on permanent vacation in places without internet access. It's the perfect bike for someone who thinks conventional motorcycles are too mainstream and enjoys the challenge of riding something that actively fights against basic physics while emptying their bank account. If you thought that was a dumb purchase, just wait until you see number 3. Only people who've hit their head would ever get near that bike. The Arch KR GT1 is Keanu Reeves' motorcycle company's attempt to build the ultimate custom bike. But at $78,000, it's more like the ultimate way to separate fools from their money while proving that celebrity endorsements can't overcome fundamental design flaws. This bespoke cruiser promises handcrafted perfection, but delivers overpriced mediocrity with a celebrity endorsement that costs more than most people's annual salaries. Powered by a 2032cc V-twin that produces 121 horsepower, it's not particularly powerful for its size or price, making it the motorcycle equivalent of paying supercar prices for minivan performance. The bike weighs over 600 pounds and handles like a chrome-plated anvil that's been filled with concrete and pushed down a hill by someone who's never heard of physics. The riding position is so uncomfortable that anything longer than a photo shoot becomes torture that would make medieval inquisitors take notes, and the suspension is calibrated for show rather than go, prioritizing looks over actual functionality. The worst part? You're paying supercar money for a motorcycle that performs like a decent cruiser with delusions of grandeur and an inflated sense of self-worth. The waiting list is longer than the bike's list of actual innovations, and when you finally get yours after waiting longer than most prison sentences, you'll discover that celebrity involvement doesn't automatically equal quality or value. It's the perfect bike for someone who has more money than sense, thinks paying extra for a famous name makes them special, and enjoys explaining to their friends why their motorcycle costs more than most people's houses, while performing like something half the price. That might have been a pretty stupid buy, but at number 2, we have an even dumber purchase for a reason you won't expect. The Lightning LS2 1.8 claims to be the world's fastest production electric motorcycle, which is like being the tallest building in a town, with no buildings, or the smartest person in a room full of people who think the Earth is flat. At $38,888, this electric superbike promises 200 horsepower and a top speed of 218 miles per hour. But good luck achieving either in the real world without the assistance of divine intervention or a team of engineers with unlimited budgets. The range is laughably short, about 100 miles if you're gentle and ride like your grandmother going to church, or 20 minutes if you actually use the performance it claims to have, making it perfect for very short trips to places with charging stations. The charging time is so long you could learn a new language, write a novel, or complete a college degree while waiting, and the charging infrastructure is so sparse you'll spend more time planning routes around charging stations than actually riding, turning every trip into a mathematical exercise that would challenge NASA scientists. The bike weighs 495 pounds, which is reasonable for an electric bike, but it feels heavy when you're pushing it to the nearest outlet after it dies unexpectedly, like a smartphone with a defective battery. The build quality is questionable at best, with fit and finish that would embarrass a kit car manufacturer who was having a bad day, making it the perfect bike for someone who wants to pay premium prices for the privilege of being stranded with an expensive paperweight that occasionally makes motorcycle noises. And finally, our number 1 spot represents the absolute pinnacle of motorcycle stupidity, a machine so ridiculously overpriced it makes everything else on this list look reasonable. The Ecosse Heretic ES1. Superbike is a $3,600,000 monument to automotive insanity that proves money can't buy common sense or good judgment. This titanium-bodied nightmare is less motorcycle and more expensive way to announce that you've completely lost touch with reality and probably shouldn't be trusted with sharp objects, financial decisions, or anything more complex than a spoon. The Heretic features a 2,409cc V-twin that produces 200 horsepower, which sounds impressive until you realize you could buy 50 decent motorcycles for the same price, or a small island, or a really nice house in most parts of the world. The bike is supposedly limited to 10 units, which is 10 too many for any sane world, and represents 10 opportunities for wealthy people to make spectacularly poor decisions that will be remembered for generations. The titanium construction makes it lighter than you'd expect, but at this price point, it should be made of compressed unicorn tears and powered by pure magic while being assembled by angels who graduated from motorcycle engineering school. The reality is that you're paying millions for a motorcycle that performs about as well as bikes costing 1% of its price, making it the ultimate example of paying premium prices for bragging rights that nobody actually cares about. But here's the ultimate insult that would make satirists weep with joy. It's not even the fastest, most powerful, or most advanced motorcycle you can buy, making it a spectacular failure on every measurable level. You're literally paying millions for the privilege of owning something that exists solely to separate the ultra-wealthy from their money while providing entertainment for the rest of us who can't believe such stupidity actually exists. It's the perfect bike for someone who thinks regular supercars are too affordable, wants to make absolutely sure everyone knows they have more money than brains, and enjoys being the subject of conversations about wasteful spending and poor decision-making. The Ecosse Heretic ES1 represents everything wrong with modern motorcycle culture. The triumph of price over performance, exclusivity over engineering, and marketing over meaningful innovation. If you buy one of these, you're not a motorcycle enthusiast. You're a walking advertisement for why wealth doesn't equal wisdom, and why some people shouldn't be allowed to make their own financial decisions. Number 10 with Kawasaki Ninja 250. A decent beginner bike with 32 horsepower that's light, reliable, and perfect for learning the fundamentals of motorcycling without dying in the process. The problem isn't the motorcycle itself. It's the delusional wannabe racers who buy it thinking they're getting a pocket rocket and then spend more on modifications than the bike originally cost, creating mechanical disasters that would make engineers weep. You've dumped $3,000 into customizing a $2,000 machine, which is like putting a tuxedo on a hamster and expecting it to win a bodybuilding competition against actual athletes. Carbon fiber fairings on something that makes less power than a decent kitchen blender running on half power. Racing stickers on a bike that gets passed by mobility scooters driven by elderly people who've given up on life and are just trying to reach the pharmacy before closing time. You installed a fancy exhaust system that sounds like a leaf blower having an anxiety attack, mixed with the dying screams of a mechanical mosquito trapped in a tin can. Your garage is filled with performance parts designed for bikes with 10 times the displacement, creating a monument to misplaced enthusiasm and poor financial planning that would make accountants cry. Your social media feeds are packed with dramatically angled photos of your track weapon that couldn't outrun a determined jogger with a decent stride and proper running shoes from a discount store. The performance hashtags and speed claims would make actual racers snort with laughter while wondering if you're having some sort of mechanical nervous breakdown or identity crisis involving two wheels. The real entertainment starts when you rev that obnoxiously loud pipe at red lights, desperately hoping someone mistakes your learner bike for actual performance machinery. Instead, everyone within a 3-block radius is wondering why someone brought a mechanical mosquito to a motorcycle gathering, and why it sounds so angry about being there, disturbing the peace, and probably violating noise ordinances. Meanwhile, experienced riders shake their heads because they know you could have bought a properly used 600cc bike for what you've invested in modifications, or better yet, spent the money on riding lessons to learn how to use what you have, instead of making it louder and more embarrassing to everyone involved. If you thought over-modifying number 10's beginner bike made you look pathetic, Number 9 makes you look like the ultimate joke at every bike meet. You somehow manage to find the worst parts of cars and motorcycles and mash them together into one $35,000 catastrophe that defies logic, physics, and basic common sense while insulting both automotive categories simultaneously. The Polaris Slingshot weighs 1,700 pounds, heavier than actual cars, yet somehow gets worse gas mileage than most pickup trucks at just 30 miles per gallon, proving that engineering can work in reverse. This mechanical nightmare handles like a broken shopping cart being pushed by someone having convulsions during an earthquake while blindfolded and dizzy. The steering connects to the wheels through what feels like dental floss, rubber bands, and wishful thinking combined with prayers to mechanical deities who have abandoned this project entirely. The suspension has all the sophistication of a trampoline designed by people who'd never seen one before, and were working from descriptions provided by someone having a stroke while describing playground equipment. Every bump in the road gets transmitted directly to your spine with the efficiency of a medieval torture device specifically designed to make chiropractors wealthy and ensure steady customer flow. You exist in automotive limbo, too weird for car people, too embarrassing for bikers, too expensive for rational people, and too ridiculous for anyone with functioning brain cells. Real motorcyclists won't acknowledge you because you've got training wheels and a steering wheel, making you about as welcome at bike nights as a vegan at a barbecue competition or a mime at a heavy metal concert. Car enthusiasts mock you for paying luxury vehicle prices for carnival ride performance, with the aerodynamics of a refrigerator that's been hit by a tornado and then pushed off a cliff by angry meteorologists. You're stuck in mechanical purgatory, spending more time explaining to confused strangers what your contraption actually is, instead of enjoying the experience of operating it, or getting anywhere useful. The Slingshot delivers all the inconvenience of motorcycling with absolutely zero of the fun, plus the added bonus of looking like someone who couldn't decide between 2 wheels or 4, and chose the worst possible compromise available in the marketplace. Your commitment issues have manifested in vehicle form, and everyone can see your mechanical indecision from miles away, creating traffic slowdowns as people stare in confusion. Number 9 might have been a joke, but number 8? That one will make you wish you were driving a slingshot in a clown suit. And trust me, that would still look less ridiculous. BMW examined motorcycles and decided they needed all the paperwork hassles with none of the actual enjoyment that makes dealing with those hassles worthwhile in the first place. The BMW C1 is a scooter pretending to be a car while failing miserably at both, like a duck trying to be a fish while wearing concrete flippers and a blindfold during a swimming competition. You're piloting something with a roof, windshield, and seatbelts, actual seatbelts on a motorcycle, yet still need a bike license because bureaucrats apparently enjoy creating confusion and paperwork for their own entertainment. Some places require helmets despite BMW's confident insistence that the roll cage provides adequate protection, giving you maximum bureaucratic hassle with minimum freedom or enjoyment from the riding experience. The tiny 125cc engine guarantees you'll be slower than determined pedestrians, while resembling someone operating a rejected movie prop from a low-budget sci-fi disaster where the special effects budget ran out halfway through production and the director gave up trying. You wanted car safety with scooter efficiency, but got something demonstrably inferior to both, like ordering a gourmet steak and receiving cardboard with ketchup packets. Other riders spot you approaching and assume you're either having a safety-related nervous breakdown or lost a bet involving poor transportation choices and questionable judgment that will haunt your reputation forever. The C1 eliminates everything exciting about motorcycling: wind, leaning, road connection, replacing it with the claustrophobic experience of driving an overpriced golf cart with delusions of grandeur and serious identity issues. You've managed to take the worst aspects of both cars and motorcycles and combine them into something that's less than the sum of its parts, which is actually an impressive achievement in its own tragically comic way that defies basic mathematics. BMW mercifully discontinued this embarrassment after realizing even their most loyal customers have limits to what they'll accept and pay money for. Think riding that BMW safety cage scooter made you look like a total clown? Number 7 is a chrome-covered catastrophe, and if you see someone on this rolling punchline, run before they ask you to join the circus. Honda grabbed their reliable Goldwing platform and wondered what would happen if they made it completely unusable, while covering it in enough chrome to cause international aviation incidents and possibly blind satellite operators working in space. The Honda Rune is an 850-pound monument to style over function that lasted exactly 2 years before Honda quietly pretended it never existed and hoped everyone would forget this embarrassing chapter in their corporate history. You paid $30,000 in 2004 money, which translates to approximately $45,000 in today's inflated currency, for a Goldwing engine crammed into a frame designed by someone overdosing on energy drinks during a sci-fi movie marathon, while having fever dreams about transportation's future and chrome's role in it. The riding position stretches your arms to neighboring counties, while folding your legs like expensive origami designed by someone who hates human anatomy and wants to punish people for having normal proportions. Parking requires strategic planning, a team of spotters, and possibly medical assistance scheduled for immediately afterward, because maneuvering 850 pounds of chrome-covered confusion exceeds normal human capabilities. Low-speed maneuvering feels like wrestling an angry grand piano that has handlebars and delusions of being a motorcycle while weighing more than most small cars. The chrome coverage is so extensive, you're basically riding a mirror with an engine attached, creating a mobile disco ball that's visible from orbit and probably violating several international treaties regarding light pollution and aviation safety. You're simultaneously stretched out like a chopper, yet cramped like a sport bike, achieving the worst aspects of both worlds with impressive efficiency that would be admirable if it weren't so completely useless. Honda discontinued this chrome catastrophe after 2 years because, shockingly, nobody wanted them except a handful of collectors who confused rarity with desirability and probably shouldn't be trusted with important financial decisions or sharp objects. Now you claim it's a valuable collector's item with investment potential, but it's not rare because it's special or innovative. It's rare because it was a terrible concept that even Honda couldn't salvage with marketing magic and corporate spin. You're not riding a classic piece of motorcycle history that will appreciate in value. You're piloting a very shiny, very expensive mistake that serves as a rolling reminder of what happens when style departments are allowed to run wild without adult supervision. That chrome disaster might have made you look like a clown, but number 6 takes it to circus-level humiliation. It's a machine that somehow makes every rider look like they're late for their juggling act. The Ducati Panigale V4 is absolute motorcycle perfection, with its 214 horsepower of racing-derived excellence, with electronics that would impress NASA engineers, and aerodynamics that make fighter jets jealous of its sophisticated design. It's specifically designed to demolish racetracks with surgical precision and make professional riders weep with joy at its capabilities. The problem isn't the bike. It's your complete inability to use it properly or appropriately for its intended purpose. You purchased a track missile designed for professional racers for coffee runs and parking lot photo shoots, which is like buying a Formula One car for grocery shopping or hiring a symphony orchestra to provide background music while you check email and browse social media. This machine was engineered for triple-digit speeds with riders who have actual skills and track experience. But you're cruising at 35 miles per hour through suburbs where it overheats like an overworked computer, trying to mine cryptocurrency while running 17 browser tabs. The aggressive racing position makes perfect sense on racetracks but becomes medieval torture during your brief suburban commutes to Starbucks and back home. You spent luxury car money on a bike demanding track time and genuine expertise, then never leave third gear because you're genuinely terrified of your own expensive purchase, but too proud to admit your limitations to anyone who asks. Other Panigale owners who actually use their bikes properly on racetracks view you with the mixture of disappointment and disgust that parents feel watching kids waste expensive Christmas gifts on stupid nonsense instead of appreciating their value. You're desperately trying to explain to anyone who'll listen why you need 214 horsepower for grocery runs, while real riders set lap records on bikes with half the power because they understand that skill matters more than specifications. You've transformed a precision racing instrument designed for speed and performance into expensive jewelry that occasionally makes impressive sounds, like using a concert Steinway piano as a coffee table or a professional chef's knife to open Amazon packages. The irony is painful. You own one of the most capable motorcycles ever built, but use it in ways that would make its designers question their life choices and career decisions. If you thought misusing a superbike made you look silly, number 5 turns you into a full-blown clown, revving, flexing, and fooling no one but yourself. You accomplished something truly spectacular and monumentally stupid. Purchasing a $55,000 motorcycle with not for street use printed in letters large enough to be visible from space, then complaining about street riding restrictions like some sort of mechanical tragedy that would make Shakespeare weep and consider changing careers. The Kawasaki H2R is a 310 horsepower supercharged missile designed exclusively for closed courses and professional riders, which apparently wasn't obvious enough for someone with your decision-making abilities. This track-only weapon lacks headlights, turn signals, mirrors, and has emissions that would embarrass industrial facilities and make environmental officers file for early retirement while questioning their life choices. Yet somehow, you convinced yourself this was reasonable for someone who probably panics during highway merging and considers aggressive lane changes extreme sports requiring protective equipment and medical supervision. You bought a machine that professional racers approach like radioactive material or unexploded ordnance, despite having riding skills suggesting you learned everything from internet videos and consider yourself an expert after watching racing highlights in medical waiting rooms. The H2R produces more power than most cars while weighing just 450 pounds, creating physics-defying power-to-weight ratios that actively challenge several fundamental laws of nature and common sense. One throttle twist could launch you into alternate dimensions or at least the nearest emergency room. But you'll never experience it because you're too busy explaining to insurance companies why your motorcycle is classified as a potential explosive device and fire hazard. The supercharger whine sounds like a jet engine having an existential crisis mixed with the screams of tortured metal, which is appropriate since that's probably what you're having every time you look at this expensive garage ornament. You wanted bragging rights for owning the most extreme bike ever manufactured, but forgot the minor detail of actually being able to use it legally anywhere without special permits and professional supervision. Now you own the world's most expensive conversation piece that occasionally makes terrifying noises when you start it up to show equally confused friends who wonder about your mental state and financial priorities. If you thought number 5 made you look like a complete lunatic, just wait for number 4. Because only a total clown would shove a car engine into a motorcycle and call it a good idea. You examined a perfectly functional motorcycle and decided it needed a Chevy V8 engine, which resembles putting rocket engines on bicycles, nuclear power in toasters, or jet engines on shopping carts while expecting reasonable results. The Boss Haus 5.8 weighs over 1,100 pounds and uses actual car tires, because motorcycle tires would simply resign from their jobs and seek professional counseling for trauma-related stress disorders. This isn't motorcycling in any recognizable sense. It's survival with handlebars attached and a death wish included in the purchase price. You're straddling a blast furnace that slow roasts your legs to medium well while consuming premium fuel at 10 miles per gallon, making every ride expensive endurance training that would interest medieval torture specialists and modern masochists with disposable income. Handling is exactly what you'd expect from cramming car engines between two wheels, completely absent, like trying to steer freight trains with positive thoughts, prayer, and strongly worded suggestions delivered through megaphones. Corners require diplomatic negotiations with physics, while stopping needs the advanced planning typically reserved for space missions or major life decisions that will affect future generations. You spent $60,000 on something requiring more advance warning than aircraft carriers just to change direction, making every ride feel like captaining a land-based oil tanker through residential neighborhoods, filled with speed bumps and concerned parents calling the authorities. If this mechanical beast tips over, don't attempt recovery. Relocate immediately, change identities, and pretend this entire episode never happened, because lifting 1,100 pounds of American excess exceeds normal human capabilities without industrial equipment and professional moving crews. The fuel consumption doesn't just drain your wallet. It actively traumatizes gas station attendants who now know you by name, credit score, and probably your mother's maiden name while keeping detailed records of your visits. You're single-handedly keeping petroleum companies profitable while contributing to climate change 1/4 mile at a time, making environmentalists weep and oil executives send you thank you cards for your dedication to fossil fuel consumption. Every time you fire up this mechanical beast, neighbors 3 blocks away know you're coming, and not in a good way that builds community relationships. You're not riding a motorcycle, you're piloting a land-based aircraft carrier that happens to have handlebars and an attitude problem that would make honey badgers seem reasonable and diplomatic by comparison. If number 4's fuel-guzzling land barge made you the ultimate clown, number 3 proves that throwing 6 figures at a bike can turn you into a walking meme on 2 wheels. At over $100,000, the Confederate Hellcat proves that unlimited money doesn't guarantee intelligence, common sense, or reasonable decision-making abilities that won't haunt you for the rest of your natural life and beyond. This solid billet aluminum sculpture weighs 600 pounds and handles like a chrome-plated refrigerator filled with concrete and launched downhill by people who've never encountered physics or basic engineering principles in educational settings. You purchased a rolling art exhibit that spends more time broken than functional, making it history's most expensive garage decoration and possibly the worst investment since pyramid schemes or cryptocurrency, launched by celebrities with questionable judgment. When something breaks, and it will, probably during demonstrations for equally wealthy and foolish friends, you'll need mortgage-level repairs, because parts apparently require unicorn tears and assembly by trained dolphins working under strict union contracts with excellent benefits. Parts availability is a joke that would make professional comedians quit their day jobs to become motorcycle parts suppliers with better job security. Finding mechanics willing to touch your expensive mistake resembles locating unicorns with engineering degrees and senses of humor about overpriced American sculptures masquerading as functional transportation. The few brave enough to work on it will charge rates making Swiss bankers blush with embarrassment and consider career changes to less expensive professions like space exploration or luxury yacht maintenance. The riding position seems designed specifically for chiropractor enrichment and ensuring steady customer streams for massage therapists and physical rehabilitation specialists who specialize in motorcycle-related injuries. The suspension is so stiff it makes medieval torture devices seem comfortable and user-friendly by comparison, while the overall experience feels like riding an expensive piece of modern art that occasionally moves and always disappoints. You're not purchasing transportation in any meaningful sense. You're buying expensive conversation pieces that occasionally function and always disappoint everyone involved in the transaction, including innocent bystanders who witness your mechanical struggles. This hand-built nightmare represents everything wrong with modern motorcycle culture: the triumph of price over performance, exclusivity over engineering, and slick marketing over meaningful innovation or genuine achievement. The Confederate Hellcat is perfect for someone who thinks regular supercars are too affordable and mainstream, wants to ensure everyone knows they have more money than brains, and enjoys being the subject of conversations about wasteful spending at motorcycle gatherings. While number 3 looked like an expensive mistake, number 2 takes bad decisions to a whole new level. This thing's a clown car wrapped in chrome. Harley-Davidson examined their century-plus heritage of loud, soul-stirring motorcycles defining American riding culture and decided to build the complete opposite. Like vegetarians opening steakhouses, mimes starting podcasts, or librarians launching heavy metal bands with aggressive marketing campaigns. The Harley-Davidson Livewire is a $30,000 lesson in removing everything exciting about motorcycling while keeping all inconveniences and adding entirely new problems nobody requested or wanted. You bought a Harley that doesn't sound, look, or ride like any Harley ever manufactured in their entire corporate history, completely defeating the purpose of Harley ownership and brand loyalty that spans generations. The advertised 146-mile range becomes purely theoretical when highway riding drops it to double digits faster than your enthusiasm for electric vehicles, turning every journey into stressful mathematics involving charging station locations and range anxiety that would make accountants nervous. The eerie silence removes the visceral rider-machine connection that makes motorcycling addictive for millions worldwide, replacing it with wind sounds and your own disappointed sighs echoing inside your helmet like a sad acoustic performance in an empty concert hall. You're planning routes around charging infrastructure instead of scenic roads, spending 40 minutes at charging stations when they work, or entire nights plugged into outlets like expensive household appliances that occasionally move. The charging network is so sparse that trip planning becomes advanced mathematics requiring strategic thinking, usually reserved for military operations or chess championships with international implications. You'll spend more time searching for functional charging stations than actually riding, making every journey feel like a scavenger hunt, where the prize is continuing your disappointing trip to nowhere special. The brutal depreciation makes financial advisors weep openly. Bikes costing nearly $30,000 now sell for under $15,000 and still don't move off dealer floors like automotive pariahs. You didn't purchase motorcycling's future. You bought an expensive lesson proving electric technology works much better with four wheels, air conditioning, and the ability to charge conveniently at home overnight without planning your entire life around battery management. Traditional Harley riders rejected it for lacking authenticity, while younger riders who might appreciate electric technology took one look at the price tag and bought electric cars instead, leaving you stuck in the middle with a bike that satisfies nobody and depreciates faster than smartphones after new model launches. And finally, we reach our number one, the ultimate circus performance. Driving this beauty isn't just a bad decision, it's the grand finale of looking like a total clown. At $3.6 million, the Ecosse Heretic ES1 represents absolute peak motorcycle stupidity and serves as definitive proof that unlimited wealth doesn't guarantee functional brain cells or reasonable decision-making abilities. This titanium monument to insanity demonstrates that some people have so much money they've completely forgotten what money is actually for, using it as expensive kindling for their dignity and social standing while paying supercar collection money for a motorcycle that performs about as well as bikes costing 1% of its ridiculous price tag. You could buy 50 decent motorcycles, purchase small tropical islands, or fund entire countries' motorcycle development programs with the same money while actually contributing something meaningful to society. Limited to just 10 units worldwide, approximately 10 too many for any sane universe, this represents golden opportunities for wealthy people to make spectacularly poor decisions that future generations will remember as prime examples of money and common sense existing in completely separate dimensions. The titanium construction makes it lighter than expected, but at this astronomical price point, it should be constructed from compressed unicorn tears, powered by pure concentrated magic, and assembled by angels who graduated summa cum laude from motorcycle engineering school. You're not purchasing transportation, you're buying a $3.6 million public announcement that you've completely lost touch with reality and probably shouldn't be trusted with sharp objects or important financial decisions. So the Heretic ES1 isn't even the fastest, most powerful, or most technologically advanced motorcycle available on the market, making it a spectacular failure on every single measurable level that actually matters to genuine motorcyclists. You're literally paying millions of dollars for bragging rights that absolutely nobody cares about, while providing endless entertainment for everyone else who can't believe such monumental stupidity actually exists in the real world. This mechanical monument to excess represents everything fundamentally wrong with modern society. The complete triumph of price over actual value, exclusivity over accessibility, and slick marketing over meaningful innovation. The manufacturing process involves more ceremony than substance, with each bike receiving individual blessing from marketing executives who've convinced themselves they're creating automotive art rather than overpriced transportation that nobody actually needs. Insurance companies probably require psychological evaluations before covering these machines, not because they're dangerous to ride, but because owning one suggests serious judgment impairment. You'll be too terrified to actually ride it because any minor damage costs more than most people's annual salaries, effectively turning your motorcycle into the world's most expensive garage sculpture that occasionally starts up to remind you of your poor financial choices and questionable priorities. Let's kick things off with the Suzuki GSX250R, a bike that screams, "I'm a sport bike." But in truth, it's actually a moped in disguise. This is the motorcycle equivalent of a chihuahua wearing a spiked collar, trying desperately to look tough while being fundamentally unthreatening. Powered by a wheezy 248cc parallel twin engine that produces a yawn-inducing 25 horsepower, this bike struggles to outrun a determined cyclist on a hill. Yet every year, thousands of wannabe racers slap on aftermarket exhausts, flashy graphics, and frame sliders, convinced they're one mod away from MotoGP glory. The problem here isn't about the bike itself. It's actually a decent beginner motorcycle. The problem is the people who buy it thinking they're getting a mini Hayabusa. These misguided souls spend thousands customizing their GSX250Rs, often investing more in modifications than the bike is worth. They'll add power commanders, air filters, and race fairings to a bike that gets about 65 miles per gallon, but couldn't pull the skin off a rice pudding. It's like putting a spoiler on a golf cart. It doesn't make it faster, it just makes you look silly. The saddest part? Many of these over-modified GSX250Rs barely get ridden. Their owners quickly realize that no amount of carbon fiber can transform their beginner bike into a GSX-R 1000. So, the bike sits in the garage, a monument to misplaced enthusiasm, sounding like an angry hairdryer when it does run. It's a great beginner bike. You can learn how to ride without dying, and that's honestly very rare for a sports bike. But if you're purchasing one thinking you'll transform it into a track weapon, you might as well set your money on fire. At least that would provide some actual heat. But if you think a lightweight beginner bike with delusions of grandeur is bad, wait until you see what happens when a cruiser manufacturer tries to build a sport bike. Our next entry is what happens when your grandpa tries to become one of today's youth. The Harley-Davidson V-Rod is what occurs when a company known for making agricultural equipment with wheels decides to build a performance motorcycle. It's the motorcycle equivalent of your 50-year-old uncle wearing skinny jeans and a backwards cap to connect with the youth. Powered by a Porsche-designed 1,130cc Revolution Vive twin engine producing 115 to 125 horsepower, the V-Rod was Harley's attempt to attract younger riders who wanted something that could actually take a corner without scraping the entire undercarriage. The thing is, V-Rod tries to be everything to everyone and ends up being nothing to anyone. A 640-pound behemoth that's too sporty for traditional Harley riders and too heavy for sport bike enthusiasts. Despite its relatively impressive engine, the V-Rod gets a dismal 37 miles per gallon and handles like a shopping cart with a flat wheel. The riding position is a bizarre compromise that leaves you neither comfortable nor in control, with forward controls that make precise handling about as likely as finding affordable healthcare. And let's talk about that radiator. A sacrilegious addition to a Harley that sticks out like a sore thumb. Traditional Harley riders rejected it for not being authentic, while performance riders laughed at its weight and handling. The V-Rod is the perfect bike for someone who wants to tell everyone they ride a Harley, but secretly wishes they bought a Ducati. It's a $17,000 identity crisis on wheels. But if you think the V-Rod is an expensive mistake, our next entry proves that even toy motorcycles can cost real motorcycle money. Prepare to meet the world's most overpriced embarrassment. Rolling in at number 8, we have the Indian FTR Jr, a bike that proves you can indeed pay too much for a toy. Nothing says I make poor financial decisions quite like spending $950 on an electric dirt bike designed for children but marketed to adults with more money than sense. The Indian FTR Jr. is a miniature electric replica of Indian's FTR 1200 flat track racer. With a top speed of 15 miles per hour and a battery range of about 140 minutes in low mode, this isn't a motorcycle. It's an expensive toy that adults use to pretend they're riding a real bike. It's marketed as a serious piece of equipment when it's really just a glorified toy, powered by a pathetic electric motor that produces the equivalent of about 3 horsepower. This 175-pound motorcycle is what happens when marketing departments are allowed to run wild. It's the motorcycle equivalent of those plastic kitchens adults buy for children, except you're the child and you paid for it yourself. The FTR Jr. doesn't even qualify for MPG ratings because it's not a real vehicle. It's a backyard plaything masquerading as a motorcycle, complete with a price tag that could get you a decent used actual motorcycle. If you're an adult riding this around your property, you're not a motorcyclist. You're a grown person on a children's toy. The only thing more embarrassing than being seen on one is having to explain to your friends why you bought it. But if you think a toy pretending to be a motorcycle is ridiculous, wait until you see what happens when a scooter tries to cosplay as a cruiser. Sliding into number 7, we have the Kawasaki Eliminator 125. A bike that tries to be a cruiser, but ends up being a scooter with delusions of grandeur. Powered by a microscopic 124cc single-cylinder engine that produces a laughable 12 horsepower, the Eliminator is neither eliminating nor impressive. It struggles to reach 65 miles per hour downhill with a tailwind, yet somehow Kawasaki had the audacity to style it like a cruiser. It tries to look like a big, bad cruiser, but has the heart of a lawnmower. Despite its excellent 70 miles per gallon fuel economy, this 290-pound cruiser is the motorcycle equivalent of a chihuahua wearing a spiked collar, trying desperately to look tough while being fundamentally unthreatening. The Eliminator 125 is a bike for people who want to look like they ride a Harley but have the budget and courage of someone who should stick to bicycles. The seat height is low enough for almost anyone, which is convenient because that's about the only demographic this bike appeals to, anyone who doesn't know better. The suspension is so basic, it makes a pogo stick look sophisticated, and the brakes require the planning and foresight usually reserved for space missions. If you're over 160 pounds, congratulations, you've just become the most powerful component on the motorcycle. Kawasaki mercifully discontinued this model, yet somehow they still occasionally appear for sale, usually by owners who finally realized that cruiser styling doesn't actually make a 125cc bike cool. But if you think an underpowered fake cruiser is confusing, our next entry will leave you scratching your head until you reach bone. This bike doesn't just have an identity crisis, it has a full-blown identity breakdown. At number 6, we have the Honda CTX 700, a bike that can't decide what it wants to be when it grows up. Is it a cruiser? Is it a sport bike? Is it a touring bike? Honda's answer was yes to all of those. And the result was a bike that failed spectacularly at being any of those things. Powered by a 670cc parallel twin engine that produces a thoroughly underwhelming 48 horsepower, the CTX 700 is a motorcycle designed by committee. It has the seating position of a cruiser, the fairing of a sport tourer, and the excitement level of a dishwasher. The criticism here is that it tries to be everything and ends up being nothing. The riding experience is equally baffling. The feet-forward position suggests cruiser, but the relatively high handlebars say touring bike, resulting in a riding position that seems specifically designed to make chiropractors wealthy. And despite its substantial size, the CTX 700 offers minimal storage space, poor passenger accommodations, and handling that can best be described as reluctant. At 500 pounds wet, it's too heavy for its power output, making its 60 miles per gallon fuel economy the only thing worth mentioning. But the real head-scratcher is the optional DCT automatic transmission that Honda grandly marketed as revolutionary. There's nothing revolutionary about paying motorcycle prices for scooter performance. The CTX 700 is the perfect bike for someone who doesn't actually want a motorcycle, but feels obligated to own one. It's the motorcycle equivalent of sensible beige slacks, technically functional, but devoid of any personality or joy. But if you think Honda's identity crisis is bad, wait until you see what happens when a Korean manufacturer tries to copy Japanese sport bikes without understanding what makes them good. Our next bike is the motorcycle equivalent of a knockoff designer handbag. Halfway through our list, we have the Hyosung GT250R, a bike that proves imitation is not always the sincerest form of flattery. This is what happens when a company looks at Japanese sport bikes and thinks, we can make that, but worse in every way. Powered by a 249cc V-twin engine that somehow manages to produce only 28 horsepower despite having twice the cylinders of its Japanese competitors, the GT250R is a masterclass in disappointment. It weighs a porky 375 pounds wet, making its power-to-weight ratio similar to that of an asthmatic hamster. The criticism here is that it tries to look like a sports bike, but performs like a scooter. Despite getting a reasonable 65 miles per gallon, the Hyosung is the motorcycle equivalent of those knockoff designer sunglasses you buy from a street vendor. It looks vaguely like the real thing until you actually use it. The fit and finish would make Fisher-Price blush, with plastics that seem designed to crack if you look at them too intensely. The electrical system appears to have been designed by someone whose understanding of electricity came from rubbing balloons on their hair. Owners report mysterious electrical gremlins that would baffle even the most experienced mechanics. And let's talk about resale value, or rather, the complete lack thereof. Buy a GT250R new, and by the time you ride it home, it's already depreciated more than a banana left in the sun. Parts availability? Hope you enjoy waiting weeks for shipping from Korea, assuming the parts are even still made. The GT250R is the perfect bike for someone who wants to look like they ride a sports bike, but doesn't want any of the reliability, performance, or respect that comes with owning a Japanese or European machine. But if you think a Korean knockoff is embarrassing, wait until you see what happens when an American icon tries to build an entry-level bike by cutting every corner possible. Our next bike is so bad, even its creator publicly destroyed one. Coming in at number 4, we have the Buell Blast, a bike that proves even the best intentions can lead to the worst outcomes. This is what happens when Harley-Davidson tries to build an entry-level motorcycle and fails spectacularly. Powered by a single-cylinder 492cc engine that produces a pathetic 34 horsepower, the Blast was supposed to be Harley's gateway drug to get new riders hooked on the brand. Instead, it became a cautionary tale about what happens when you cut too many corners. It tries to be a Harley, but ends up being a headache. Despite its relatively good 65 miles per gallon fuel economy, this 360-pound monstrosity handles like it's allergic to corners. The suspension seems to be made of recycled pogo sticks, and the brakes require the kind of forward planning usually reserved for retirement savings. The Blast's plastic body panels crack if you look at them wrong, and the engine vibrates so violently at certain RPMs that owners report losing fillings. It's like riding a paint mixer that occasionally decides to transport you from one place to another. Eric Buell himself was so embarrassed by this bike that he literally crushed one in a promotional video for his next company. When the creator of your motorcycle publicly destroys one to make a point, perhaps it's time to reconsider your purchase. The Buell Blast is the perfect bike for someone who wants the Harley-Davidson experience of constant maintenance and disappointment, but doesn't have the budget for a full-size Harley. But if you think 2 wheels of disappointment is bad, wait until you see what happens when they add a 3rd wheel to the mix. Our next entry proves that sometimes more isn't better. It's just more expensive and more ridiculous. Rolling into the top 3, we have the Can-Am Spyder, a vehicle that proves 3 wheels are not always better than 2. This is what happens when someone looks at a motorcycle and thinks, this would be better if it was more like a snowmobile with wheels. Powered by a Rotax 998cc V-twin engine, in most models that produces around 100 horsepower, the Spyder isn't a motorcycle. It's a 1,000-pound identity crisis. It has 3 wheels, a car-like seat, and the handling characteristics of a shopping cart with a wonky wheel. Offering the thrill of motorcycling without any of the actual thrill, despite getting only about 35 miles per gallon, the Spyder costs as much as a decent car, starting at around $17,000 and going up to $27,000 for models that come with more unnecessary gadgets than a Sky Mall catalog. The Spyder removes everything that makes motorcycling enjoyable: the lean, the connection to the road, the sense of freedom, and replaces it with a bloated, overcomplicated machine that handles like a drunk rhinoceros. It doesn't lean into corners, it plows through them with all the grace of a bulldozer. The Spyder is the perfect vehicle for someone who wants to tell everyone they ride a motorcycle, but is terrified of actually riding one. It's the motorcycle equivalent of those swimming pools with the plastic lane dividers. Technically, you're in the water, but no one's impressed by your bravery. But if you think a three-wheeled monstrosity is the height of motorcycle confusion, wait until you see what happens when an iconic American brand tries to go green overnight. Our next bike proves that even the most established manufacturers can completely miss the mark. At number 2, we have the Harley-Davidson Livewire, a bike that proves even the most iconic brands can miss the mark. This is what happens when a company known for making loud, inefficient cruisers tries to go green overnight. Powered by a battery that produces 105 horsepower and 86 foot-pounds of torque, the Livewire could have been revolutionary. Instead, it's a $30,000 monument to missed opportunities. The criticism here is that it tries to be a Harley for the modern age, but ends up being a very expensive experiment. This 550-pound electric motorcycle offers a paltry 146-mile range in the city and much less on the highway, making it impractical for the long rides Harley owners typically enjoy. It's the equivalent of buying a boat that's afraid of water. The Livewire is a Harley that doesn't sound like a Harley, doesn't look like a Harley, and doesn't ride like a Harley. It's an identity crisis with handlebars, marketed to environmentally conscious riders who somehow have $30,000 to spend on a motorcycle, but not enough sense to buy one that can actually go the distance. And let's talk about charging. Hope you enjoy spending 40 minutes at a DC fast charger or an entire night on a standard outlet. Nothing says freedom of the open road quite like planning your route around charging stations and bringing a good book for the weights. The Livewire is the perfect bike for someone who wants to tell their friends they care about the environment, but doesn't actually need to go anywhere. But if you think an overpriced electric Harley is the pinnacle of motorcycle madness, prepare yourself for our number 1 spot. This final bike proves that sometimes having too much of everything creates the perfect storm of motorcycle stupidity. And finally, at number 1, we have the Suzuki B-King, the motorcycle equivalent of bringing a nuclear weapon to a knife fight and still somehow losing. The B-King started life as a concept bike featuring the engine from the Hayabusa, the world's fastest production motorcycle. By the time it reached production in 2007, it had transformed into a 1,340cc naked bike that produced 181 horsepower and weighed a staggering 518 pounds wet. Was built to be a superbike for the street, but ends up being a heavy, unwieldy beast. This monstrosity gets a dismal 30 miles per gallon and features exhaust pipes the size of industrial drainage systems. The styling can best be described as what would happen if a transformer had indigestion, all bulges and unnecessary plastic in places where no plastic should be. Despite its impressive power, the B-King handles like a supertanker thanks to its weight and bizarre weight distribution. It's too powerful for the street, too heavy for the track, and too ugly for photographs. It's a bike without a purpose, a solution to a problem no one had. The B-King was so poorly received that Suzuki discontinued it after just 3 years, making it one of the shortest production runs for a flagship model from a major manufacturer. Today, they occasionally appear for sale, usually by owners who finally realized that having the biggest engine doesn't actually translate to having the most fun. The B-King is the perfect bike for someone who wants to tell everyone how fast their motorcycle is, while secretly being terrified to use more than 20% of the throttle. These rolling disasters don't just fail to impress. They actively repel anyone with functioning brain cells. Thanks for watching. Want to watch more? Click on your screen now.